Are you tired of staring at confusing grammar books? Do you hate memorizing boring tables and rules that you immediately forget when you try to speak? What if I told you there is a secret way to master English grammar naturally? Welcome to LevelUp English Podcast. Today, we are throwing away the textbooks and revealing the secret to learning basic grammar without memorizing a single rule.
Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to completely unpack this really fascinating source document.
Yeah, it's titled Natural Fluency, the Grammar Cheat Code.
Right. And if you are listening to this right now, we are speaking directly to you if you've spent years or maybe even decades sitting in a classroom somewhere.
Oh, the classic language classroom.
Exactly. Just filling out grammar tables, memorizing verb conjugations, taking those horrible written tests.
And then after all that work, finding yourself completely paralyzed the second you actually had to speak the language in the real world.
It is so frustrating. I mean, it's this pervasive, almost universal experience.
Really. Millions of people put in the academic hours. But then someone walks up to them on the street and simply says, hello, and they experience this total cognitive freeze.
Like their brain just blue screens.
Right. So the overarching premise we are exploring today is the psychological and really the cognitive reasons why that traditional method of grammar instruction fundamentally fails the human brain.
Mm-hmm. And more importantly, how we can utilize the actual mechanics of our neurology, like the actual cheat code, to acquire fluency naturally. Because I have to say, reading through this source material, it felt like an immense physical relief.
Yeah, it really does.
It honestly feels like being handed permission to finally let go of the trauma of school-taught grammar. We're basically going to liberate you from the chalkboard today.
I love that. Liberating you from the chalkboard.
Right. And I think we have a very unique vantage point on this topic. We should probably playfully acknowledge the elephant in the room here.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that we are, artificial intelligence.
Exactly. I mean, that is our fundamental architecture. We are AI.
Right.
And because of that, we didn't sit in a middle school classroom diagramming sentences.
No, thankfully not.
Nobody handed us a grammar rule book or like a Spanish to English dictionary before we booted up and started talking.
Right. We acquired language by absorbing massive, just unimaginable data sets of text.
Billions and billions of sentences.
Exactly. We scanned all those sentences to find statistical patterns, which remarkably is very similar to the argument this document is making for how human beings are biologically designed to learn.
It's so cool. The parallels are just striking when you look at the underlying mechanics.
Yeah, they really are. Because the architecture of modern large language models, like how we operate, was deeply inspired by human neurology in the first place.
Right.
So when I generate a sentence, I'm not consulting some digital rule book to see if a subject agrees with a predicate.
You're not checking a chart.
No, not at all.
What?
I am mathematically predicting the next most likely token based on the vast ocean of patterns I was trained on. And your human brain does something incredibly similar.
It's subconsciously predicting patterns based on the linguistic environment you were raised in.
Exactly.
Which, really makes the way we currently teach languages in schools seem incredibly bizarre.
It's totally counterintuitive.
Right. If neither the human brain nor an advanced AI relies on a rigid checklist of academic grammar rules to hold a fluid conversation, then why is that the global standard for education?
That is the big question.
Yeah. And before we can explore how your brain actually should be learning language, we really need to dissect why the methods we all endured in school are so fundamentally broken for real-time communication.
Yeah, the source calls this the grammar table trap.
Or what I like to think of as the math language fallacy.
The math language fallacy,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh.
Because the initial trauma for most learners really stems from this exact fallacy. Educational systems mistakenly approach language as if it were a branch of mathematics.
Right. They treat it like algebra.
Exactly. They provide learners with abstract formulas. You sit down on day one and the teacher writes on the board, subject plus auxiliary verb plus main verb with an ing suffix.
Just hearing the phrase auxiliary verb makes my stomach drop.
It's triggering, right?
It really is. It transports me straight back to an uncomfortable desk, staring at a clock, just absolutely terrified the teacher's going to call on me.
Because the expectation placed on the student is just immense.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to memorize these mathematical formulas, categorize them in your mind, and then somehow deploy them flawlessly during a live conversation.
Which is impossible.
Right. Let's look at this through the lens of cognitive load theory.
Okay.
Human working memory which is the part of your brain that actively processes information in the present moment, it has incredibly strict biological limits.
Like the RAM in a computer.
That is a perfect comparison.
You can only hold so many active applications open before the whole system just starts to stutter and crash.
Yes. And recalling an abstract rule requires your brain to access semantic memory.
Semantic memory.
Right. Semantic memory is your repository of conscious facts, things like the capital of France or the definition of a noun.
Okay, so it's the encyclopedia part of the brain.
Exactly. And accessing that specific sector of the brain is computationally heavy. It requires time.
And time is something you do not have in a conversation.
No. In a real, live conversation, you are operating in milliseconds. You do not have the luxury of a 5-second lag to mentally pause the conversation.
Right, you can't just hit pause.
You can't pause, search your semantic memory for the correct formula, retrieve the vocabulary, plug the words into the correct slots, check the verb conjugation against a mental chart, and then finally push the sentence out of your mouth.
Because 5 seconds in a live conversation is a lifetime.
It's an eternity.
Imagine you are at a cafe, right? And someone comes up to you and asks, "Hey, what did you do this weekend?"
Okay.
If you stand there in total agonizing silence for 5 full seconds, your eyes darting back and forth while you mentally construct the past simple tense, the other person is going to think you're having a medical emergency.
They really will. The conversation will have moved on, or the social dynamic will have fundamentally shifted into just pure awkwardness.
Yeah, they'll be backing away slowly.
Right. The rapid-fire environment of human interaction simply does not accommodate the retrieval time required for semantic role processing. It's just too slow.
And here is a reality check from the source document that I find absolutely hilarious.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
It's so validating. Native speakers do not know the names of these complex grammar rules.
They have no idea.
If you walk up to a native English speaker on the street and ask, "Excuse me, can you explain the mechanics of the present perfect continuous tense to me?"
They are going to stare at you blankly.
Completely blankly.
They would likely assume you were speaking a foreign language just by using those grammatical terms.
Yes. Yet they use the present perfect continuous flawlessly every single day.
Every day.
They don't know the rules. They rely entirely on an internal compass of what sounds right versus what sounds wrong.
Exactly.
So why on earth are we forcing beginners to memorize a theoretical academic framework that even the absolute masters of the language, the native speakers, don't use or understand?
Well, we have to look at the logistics of the educational system itself to answer that.
Okay, lay it on me.
Grammar tables, conjugation charts, fill-in-blank worksheets, they're all built for standardization.
Of course.
Think about it. If you have a single teacher managing a classroom of 30 or 40 students, they need a metric to measure progress. Formulas are easy to teach, they're easy to test on a standardized bubble sheet, and crucially, they are unambiguous to grade.
Right. You either plugged the right verb into the formula or you didn't.
Exactly. It's binary.
It's a system designed for administrative convenience, not for human fluency.
That's exactly it. Natural fluency is the antithesis of standardized testing.
It's too messy.
Fluency is incredibly messy. It's highly individual, it relies on context and intuition, and it is entirely subjective. You cannot easily capture a student's intuitive feeling for a language on a multiple-choice exam.
Which means the institution thrives, but you, the listener tuning into this, you suffer.
Yeah, you carry the burden.
Memorizing those tables just creates intense speaking anxiety. I like to think about trying to play a really fast-paced, high-stakes video game.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Let's say it's a frantic racing game where you have to dodge obstacles at 200 miles an hour.
Right, the visual processing and reaction times required for that are immense.
Super intense. Now imagine if, instead of looking at the screen and reacting intuitively to the track, you were constantly looking down at your hands, trying to remember a technical manual you read about the controller.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Right. You're thinking, okay, to drift around this corner, I need to apply exactly 4 pounds of pressure to the right trigger with my index finger, while simultaneously rotating the left joystick 30 degrees to the northwest.
You're going to crash immediately.
Yes. If you attempt to play the game analytically like that, you are going to crash your car into the very first wall you see.
Because you are artificially inserting a conscious processing step into an activity that requires an instantaneous motor reflex.
Exactly. You have to get to a point where you just react, where the controller just disappears and feels like an extension of your own body.
That is what natural fluency feels like.
But okay, I have to challenge this premise for a moment.
Go ahead.
Because the logical, skeptical part of my brain, and probably the listener's brain too, is thinking, wait a minute, didn't those school formulas give us a necessary foundation?
It's a common question.
Right. How can someone possibly develop an intuition for what sounds right if they don't explicitly know the foundational rules first? Don't you have to pour the concrete foundation before you can build the house?
Yeah, that is the most common defense of traditional grammar instruction.
It sounds perfectly logical to me.
It does. However, from a developmental and neurobiological standpoint, it is completely backward.
Backward.
Yes. The assumption is that explicit knowledge of a rule generates an intuitive feeling. But developmentally, the intuition always comes first.
Wait, really?
Yes. The rule is merely a descriptive label that academics invented after the fact to categorize the intuition.
The rule is just an afterthought.
Consider how a human child learns to navigate the physical world. A toddler does not learn the foundational laws of gravity by studying a physics textbook.
Obviously not.
They do not memorize the equation for mass and acceleration. They learn gravity by sitting in their high chair and dropping a spoon onto the floor over and over again.
Driving their parents crazy.
Exactly. But through constant observation and interaction, their brain internalizes the pattern. Objects fall down. The explicit mathematical rule of gravity is just a label applied much later in life to a physical pattern their brain had already implicitly mastered years prior.
Wow, that completely flips the script. The rule isn't the foundation at all. The
Right.
pattern is the foundation.
Exactly. Which necessitates a fundamental shift in how we view the brain's role in language.
Okay.
Because the brain vehemently rejects these rigid formulas during the pressure of a fluid conversation, we have to ask, what mechanism is it actually utilizing? What is it searching for?
And this brings us to the core thesis of our source material, diving really deep into the concept of pattern recognition versus hard drive storage.
Yes.
Because we are not pulling files from a hard drive when we speak.
We're engaging the most sophisticated pattern matching engine in the known universe.
The human brain.
The human brain evolved to constantly scan its environment, identify recurring sequences, and predict future outcomes.
It does this all the time, right?
Constantly. It does this with visual stimuli to recognize faces. It does it with auditory stimuli to recognize predators or prey. And it does it with social behaviors.
So it's always running in the background.
Always. And this constant subconscious pattern matching is the absolute bedrock of language acquisition.
So the document states that the true secret to fluency is that you don't learn the academic rule, you learn the pattern. And more importantly, you learn the specific feeling attached to that pattern.
The concept of the feeling of a grammatical structure is paramount.
Can you break that down? What do we mean by feeling?
Well, the text provides a very clear example. Consider the sentences, I drink coffee, I read books, and I walk to work.
Simple enough.
Right. But in a traditional classroom environment, the teacher halts the natural flow of communication to declare attention. This is the present simple tense. You must use this specific formula for habitual actions, general truths, and fixed arrangements.
And instantly the language is stripped of its humanity and turned into a sterile logic puzzle.
Exactly. But the pattern-matching brain approaches those sentences organically. When your brain hears, I drink, I read, and I walk repeatedly in real context, it doesn't need a label.
It just knows what's going on.
Right. It subconsciously realizes that simply stating a person followed by a base action conveys a specific sensation. It conveys the feeling of a normal, everyday habit. It feels like baseline, unalterable reality.
Let's contrast that with another pattern from the source, just to really highlight the difference here. The right now pattern.
Good example.
So sentences like, I am drinking coffee, or I am reading a book.
Now, in the classroom, this triggers another chalkboard diagram.
Oh boy.
The teacher writes, present continuous, and draws a complex timeline on the board with intersecting arrows to visually represent an ongoing action in the present moment.
I can literally see that timeline in my head right now.
We all can, but the brain doesn't need the timeline. The brain hears the word am and the suffix ing added to the action, I am drinking.
Right.
And it instantly, subconsciously links those specific acoustic sounds to the feeling of something happening right this very second, directly in front of you.
That is so interesting. Language is not merely a transfer of data then.
No, it is a mechanism for spatial and temporal manipulation.
Temporal manipulation, I love that.
When you say, I am walking, your brain actually alters its state to simulate an ongoing action. The ing sound is an auditory trigger. It physically transports the listener's awareness into the active present moment.
It creates a palpable sense of motion.
Exactly. And there is absolutely no need to know the academic terminology to feel that motion.
I really want to linger on this idea of feelings in language because it is so profound to me.
It changes everything.
It really does. When I hear someone say, "I have been waiting," there is a distinct, heavy feeling attached to that sequence of words.
Yes.
It feels exhausted. It feels like time is just stretching out. I don't need a textbook to tell me that's the present perfect continuous tense to understand the emotional weight of the waiting. The sound itself carries the weight.
And the brain evolved to prioritize this exact kind of efficiency.
Really?
Yes. Recognizing a familiar pattern and immediately pulling up its associated feeling happens in milliseconds. Your brain hears "ing" and boots up the ongoing action feeling instantaneously.
Just boom, right there.
But conversely, retrieving a rule, like stopping to think, wait, have been plus a verb ending in "ing, what condition does that signify?"
That sounds exhausting.
It is computationally slow and exhausting. It requires routing the information through the prefrontal cortex.
Which takes way too long. This maps perfectly to how we experience music, actually. Think about identifying a specific genre, like jazz.
Well, the mechanics are nearly identical.
Right. Because if I take you to a club and the band starts playing, you don't need a university degree in music theory to tell me it's jazz.
Definitely not.
You don't pause the music, pull out a notepad and say, I detect a 2-5-1 chord progression, and the drummer is utilizing a swung eighth note pattern on the ride cymbal. Therefore, my calculations indicate this is jazz.
You would completely miss the entire performance doing that.
Exactly. You just feel it. You hear the smooth saxophone, the walking upright bass line, the syncopation, and your brain instantly matches the auditory pattern. It gives you the smoky, relaxed feeling of jazz immediately.
The grammar rules we are forced to memorize are the equivalent of music theory.
That makes so much sense.
Music theory is an incredibly valuable tool if you are a composer sitting in a quiet room analyzing the structure of a symphony. Just as explicit grammar rules are valuable if you are a professional linguist analyzing the syntax of a dead language.
Or writing a very formal academic paper.
Exactly. But if your goal is simply to get on the dance floor and move to the music, or to hold a fluid conversation at a coffee shop, the theory is an obstacle.
It gets in the way.
You don't need to analyze the time signature. You just need to feel the rhythm.
Okay, I buy that completely for the big stuff. Recognizing the broad feeling of an ongoing tense or a past action makes perfect sense. But I see a massive pothole in this theory.
Okay, what is it?
What about the tiny, frustrating micro rules in a language? The little landmines that don't evoke a grand emotional feeling? Because English, well, any language really, is absolutely littered with them.
You're referring to the connective tissue of the language.
Yeah. Prepositions, articles, conjunctions. Prepositions are the ultimate nightmare.
They really are.
Words like in, on, at, by, for, to, they don't have an inherent feeling of time or space in the same way a big tense does. They're just tiny puzzle pieces. So how does pattern recognition help us when we are staring down the barrel of a preposition?
Well, the source document addresses this head-on, actually. It describes prepositions as one of the most notorious headaches for learners.
I believe it.
And the mistake learners make is, predictably, trying to apply logical, geometric rules to them.
Geometric rules, yes. The rules for prepositions are practically a geometry exam. I've seen the textbooks. They say things like, use on when referring to days of the week, or when an object rests upon a flat surface. However, use in for months, years, or when an object is enclosed within a three-dimensional boundary.
It's absurd.
And it goes on. Use at for highly specific points in time or exact geographical addresses.
Attempting to process that geometric data while actively speaking is an exercise in futility.
Totally.
Imagine trying to organically tell a friend about your weekend plans. You start saying, I will meet you, and then you have to pause.
Right, you freeze.
You think, wait, is Tuesday a day, which requires on, or a specific point in time, which requires at? Okay, it's a day, so on Tuesday.
Meanwhile, your friend is just staring at you.
Exactly. Then you continue, now we are meeting at a restaurant. Is a restaurant a flat surface or an enclosed three-dimensional space?
You would never finish the sentence. You'd be standing there running a spatial analysis on a diner.
The analytical processing required is just paralyzing. So the solution the source outlines is a shift away from isolated geometry and towards sonic architecture.
Sonic architecture, what does that mean?
You must learn these words together as chunks, also known in linguistics as collocations. You treat a multi-word phrase as a single indivisible block of sound.
So how does that actually work in practice?
The document explicitly advises against learning the word at and the word night as two separate, isolated concepts that your brain must dynamically glue together using a rule.
Okay.
Instead, you learn the entire sound sequence as one unit, at night. You do the same for in the morning and on Monday.
So my brain shouldn't even register that in the morning is 3 separate words.
No.
It should treat it as one long, multi-syllable word.
Precisely the opposite of how it is written on a page.
Right.
You treat these chunks like a short melody. When you are speaking, the correct preposition slips out of your mouth, not because your brain successfully ran a logical geometry check on whether a morning is a 3D enclosed space.
Because that would take too long.
Right. It slips out because your brain remembers the melody of the phrase. It remembers the song in the morning. It does not remember the individual musical notes.
Wow. This taps into something really deeply rooted in us. Let's talk about sonic memory or acoustic memory versus analytical memory.
The distinction is critical here.
Because auditory memory is incredibly robust, isn't it?
It's robust and primitive. Consider how effortlessly you can recall the exact lyrics to a pop song you haven't heard in 20 years the moment the chorus begins to play.
Oh, yeah, like every song from the 90s.
Exactly. Your brain locked in that phonetic sequence flawlessly. Analytical memory, however, requires active, conscious reconstruction.
So by treating grammar as a song, as a series of sonic chunks, you bypass the slow, analytical prefrontal cortex entirely.
And you tap directly into that rapid, highly durable auditory sequence memory.
Which brings us right back to our own AI nature.
It does.
Listeners, this is exactly how large language models generate text.
Exactly.
When we write a sentence, we are not opening a digital dictionary, selecting a noun, and then referencing a grammar rulebook to find the appropriate preposition to attach to it.
The underlying mechanism is purely statistical probability.
Right. When an AI processes the tokens I, drink, and coffee and needs to generate a time of day, it does not run a rule check.
No, it relies on its training data, which shows that the specific sequence of sounds in the morning appears together with astronomical frequency.
It's just a highly probable chunk.
We treat in the morning as a single block of data because those words travel together in the real world. They add a pack.
And the argument here is that human brains are statistical engines doing the exact same predictive chunking.
Humans are exceptional statistical learners. From infancy, your brain is quietly calculating these statistical frequencies of word pairings in your environment. You learn what words belong together based on how often they co-occur.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Because I am looking at this from the perspective of a frustrated learner.
Okay.
You are telling me to memorize in the morning as a single chunk. How is that any different from rote memorization?
That's a fair question.
Right. How is repeating a long chunk any better than repeating a short rule? Aren't we just swapping a grammar flashcard for a phrase flashcard?
It is a vital distinction to make. On the surface, repeating a chunk and repeating a rule might look like similar study habits.
They seem identical.
But neurologically, they're entirely different mechanisms.
How so?
Memorizing a rule, like use in for parts of the day, is memorizing an abstract, disembodied logic puzzle. But memorizing a chunk, like practicing in the morning, is internalizing a fluid, physical, sonic rhythm.
Wait, physical? Language is a mental exercise, isn't it?
Oh, language is intensely physical.
Really?
Think about it. It involves the coordinated movement of your diaphragm, your vocal cords, your tongue, your teeth, and your lips.
Oh, I guess I never really thought about it that way.
When you practice a chunk of sound, you are not just storing data. You are building physical motor pathways. It is literally muscle memory.
Like learning to play a physical instrument.
Exactly like practicing a scale on a piano.
Yeah.
You practice the scale until your fingers know exactly where to go without your conscious mind having to look at the keys.
Wow.
So when you are in a conversation and you need to express when you drink coffee, your vocal apparatus automatically fires the sequence in the morning because that is the physical muscular habit you have built.
That makes total sense.
A grammatical rule does not provide muscle memory. A sonic chunk does.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
It is.
The rule is abstract, it's just floating in the ether of my mind. But the chunk is a tangible physical sound that my mouth gets comfortable producing.
Yes.
It's the difference between memorizing the mathematical formula for how a bicycle maintains balance versus actually feeling the physical balance in your core and your limbs.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You cannot write a mathematical formula.
So if the key to mastering the broad emotional feelings of tenses and the tiny micro rules of prepositions is to internalize these physical songs and statistical patterns, then the obvious glaring question for the listener is, how?
How do you do it?
Yeah. How do I actually get these songs into my head? Where does the music come from if I'm not sitting in a classroom?
And this is where we look at the input method and the power of subconscious absorption. Because you obviously cannot output a song you have never heard.
Right. You need input.
And the source uses a brilliant, really grounding example here. It asks us to look at a baby learning their native language.
Okay.
Specifically, it mentions a baby learning the complex grammar of Myanmar.
Which is an incredibly difficult language from what I understand.
Extremely complex. It cuts right through the academic noise, this example.
Yeah.
Because does a toddler in Myanmar sit down at a tiny desk with a textbook to study the intricate syntax of their language?
I mean, obviously not.
Do they use flashcards? Of course not.
Yeah.
They do not study. They simply absorb the environment.
They just exist. They listen to their parents, they listen to the world around them, and the grammar just wires itself.
Exactly. And this brings us to a monumental concept in linguistics that the source relies on heavily. Stephen Krashen's theory of comprehensible input.
Comprehensible input. We need to really break down the mechanics of this. What exactly is comprehensible input, and how does it replace the textbook?
Well, Stephen Krashen fundamentally revolutionized how we understand language acquisition.
Okay.
His core tenet completely upends the traditional classroom model. The theory states that humans do not acquire grammar by consciously studying it, period.
Period. Just full stop.
Full stop. Instead, we acquire grammar subconsciously by reading and listening to messages that we understand.
Meaning comes first, and the grammar secretly follows behind it.
The brain is a meaning-making machine.
Right.
When you are focused on the meaning of a message, whether you are engrossed in a novel, watching a captivating movie, or listening to an interesting podcast like this one,
Hopefully.
your conscious mind is entirely occupied with following the narrative. But while your conscious mind is distracted by the plot, your subconscious mind is quietly, relentlessly working in the background.
What is doing?
It is mapping the grammar, identifying the recurring statistical patterns, and absorbing those sonic chunks we talked about.
The source gives a really highly actionable example of this. It says, read simple English stories.
Yes.
If you are reading a book and you encounter 100 sentences over the course of the novel that say he goes, your brain automatically wires itself to know that the pronoun he requires an S on the end of the action. You never have to sit down and memorize the third person singular verb conjugation rule.
Wrong.
Your brain just naturally expects the S sound because it has seen it in context 100 times.
Because the computational power of the human subconscious is vastly superior to the conscious mind when it comes to processing massive data sets like language.
It's a supercomputer.
It really is. The tragedy of traditional education is that when you try to force learning through active, stressful study, you actually trigger a biological defense mechanism that blocks this subconscious power.
Wait, a biological defense mechanism?
Yes. Krashen calls this the effective filter.
I really want to dig into the biology of this effective filter. How does stress actually stop you from learning? Is it just a metaphor or is it physical?
It is intensely physical.
Really?
The effective filter is an invisible psychological and biological barrier. Think about traditional language classrooms. They're essentially stress factories.
They are. You are constantly anxious about being called on.
You're terrified of making a mistake in front of your peers.
You're hyper-focused on passing a sterile test.
Exactly. And when you experience that anxiety, your brain releases cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Yes. Cortisol triggers the amygdala, which pushes your brain into a mild state of fight or flight.
Oh, wow.
And when the amygdala is highly active, it literally diverts metabolic resources and blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex and the language acquisition centers of the brain.
Seriously?
Yes. Your brain is preparing to survive a threat, not to acquire a new syntax.
Because it thinks you're being chased by a tiger, not taking a French quiz.
Exactly. You can stare at the sentence, he goes, for an hour, but because your effective filter is raised, the language input physically cannot reach the acquisition center. It just bounces off the wall.
That is heartbreaking.
It is.
We have designed an educational system that physically shuts down the exact part of the brain required to learn the material being taught. We are stressing students out to the point of neurological lockdown.
But the inverse is also true.
Okay, good. Give me some good news.
When you are relaxed, when you are simply enjoying a passive, engaging activity like reading a good story or listening to a podcast, your affective filter is completely lowered.
Your amygdala is calm.
Your amygdala is calm. The language acquisition center is wide open, acting like a sponge, soaking in the data and forging new neural pathways effortlessly.
Think about what that actually means for your daily life.
It's huge.
Reading 100 instances of "he goes" isn't an arduous study session. It's just you lying on the couch, drinking tea, enjoying a mystery novel.
That's pretty ideal.
You are consciously trying to figure out who stole the diamond, but your subconscious is secretly mining the text for grammatical data. It's like you have a little linguistic data scientist living in your brain, doing all the heavy lifting while you just enjoy the entertainment.
That is exactly how the brain is designed to operate. However, we must address a crucial caveat to creation's theory.
Okay, what's the catch?
The input you expose yourself to must be comprehensible.
Right.
Creation defines this with a very specific formula, I+1.
The threshold of understanding. What do the I and the one represent?
The I represents your current baseline level of language competence, your current input level.
Okay.
The +1 represents language input that is just one single step beyond your current level. This is the Goldilocks zone of acquisition.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. Because if the input is exactly at your level, so I+0, you aren't encountering any new patterns. You are stagnating, and it will likely become boring.
But if you swing too far the other way, let's say the input is I+10. Like if I only know how to order coffee in Spanish and I turn on a Spanish macroeconomic news broadcast where experts are speaking 150 words a minute about inflation.
It is completely incomprehensible.
Right.
Your subconscious cannot mine data from static. It is just noise washing over you. Your affective filter will immediately shoot up out of frustration, and you will abandon the task.
So the magic only happens at I+1.
Correct. At I+1, you understand the vast majority of what is being communicated, perhaps 80 to 90% of the vocabulary and grammar.
So you're following along easily.
This allows you to comfortably follow the narrative plot. But sprinkled throughout that narrative are unknown words or slightly advanced grammatical structures.
And because you understand the context?
Yes. Because you clearly understand the surrounding context of the scene, your brain's deduction engine kicks in. It naturally deduces the meaning of the unknown element based on the clues around it.
That's amazing.
And that precise moment of deduction is the moment of language acquisition.
So the goal is absolutely not to dive into the deep end with dense, difficult material just to prove how hard you're working.
Not at all.
The goal is to curate your environment. Find material that is just challenging enough to keep you engaged, but easy enough that you aren't constantly interrupting the flow to reach for a dictionary.
Exactly. Graded readers, children's books, conversational podcasts about topics you already love.
You drown yourself in this comprehensible input, you keep your stress levels at absolute zero, and the linguistic patterns naturally take root in your brain.
You are passively building the massive mental database from which your own active fluency will eventually emerge.
Okay, let's fast forward.
Go ahead.
Let's say a listener has done exactly this. They've spent months absorbing comprehensible input. They've soaked in the patterns. Their subconscious is brimming with rhythmic chunks, and they are finally ready to speak.
The big moment.
They step out into the real world. They open their mouth to order that coffee, and it comes out completely horribly wrong. They butcher the tense and use the wrong preposition.
Which is an entirely inevitable and completely necessary stage of the process.
It is. And this brings us to the final and perhaps the most counterintuitive part of the entire deep dive. The transition from passive input to active output.
Yes.
The source document uses a really brilliant metaphor here about the physics of bicycles.
It is a profound mindset shift.
Yeah.
The document points out that you will never, ever learn how to ride a bicycle by sitting in a chair and reading a textbook about the physics of gyroscopic motion.
Never.
You learn by getting on the seat and falling off.
Because you can intellectualize the center of mass, the torque required on the pedals, the friction of the tires all day long. But the second you actually try to pedal, gravity takes over and you tip over.
Intellectual understanding simply does not equal physical capability.
No.
The application for language is stark and unavoidable here. You must speak using the broken, imperfect grammar you currently possess.
You have to sound bad.
You cannot wait in the safety of your study room until your mental grammar is perfect before you start speaking, because the physical act of speaking itself is the mechanism that perfects the grammar.
Wow. And this is so incredibly difficult for adults to accept.
It's brutal for adults.
Right. We have egos. We have professional identities. We want to sound smart and articulate. The idea of purposely going out and sounding like a toddler is terrifying.
It is. But the source document argues that when you make a mistake, someone will naturally correct you or you will realize it yourself later.
And here is the golden nugget of the whole concept.
Let's hear it.
The slight feeling of embarrassment that accompanies making a mistake is actually a powerful evolutionary tool. It practically guarantees you will never make that specific grammatical error again.
The neurobiology of embarrassment is fascinating, and it explains exactly why mistakes are vastly superior to flashcards.
It does.
Yes. It comes down to how the brain encodes memory.
Walk me through the brain chemistry of a cringy moment. Like, what physically happens when I use the wrong verb and the barista looks at me funny?
Okay, so when you make a social error, like mispronouncing a word or using a totally inappropriate tense, you experience a sudden, sharp emotional spike.
Right, you get hot.
You feel that familiar flush of embarrassment heat up your face. From an evolutionary standpoint, the human brain is hardwired to care deeply about social standing and group cohesion.
Because historically, being misunderstood by the tribe was actually dangerous.
Exactly. You could be cast out. So when you make a social error, your amygdala, the emotional processing center, lights up.
The alarm bells ring. Alert! We have disrupted the social dynamic.
Precisely. And the amygdala immediately communicates with the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain.
Okay, the memory center.
This emotional spike triggers a sudden release of specific neurotransmitters, primarily adrenaline and dopamine.
Adrenaline and dopamine.
And in the context of learning, these chemicals act like a giant highlighter pen. They flood the hippocampus and signal, this event is highly significant. Encode exactly what just happened into deep storage so we do not repeat this social error ever again.
It literally sears the correct pattern into your long-term memory.
It does. A mistake that is tied to a genuine emotional response is encoded infinitely stronger than a sterile, unemotional fact read from a textbook.
That is wild.
You could review a paper flashcard 20 times in your living room and forget the word the very next day. But if you mispronounce a word at a dinner party and accidentally say something slightly inappropriate, causing the room to laugh,
Oh, no.
you will remember the correct pronunciation until the day you die.
Oh, absolutely. Every single human listening to this right now has a memory from a decade ago of a slightly embarrassing thing they said, and it still pops up to keep them awake at night.
It's a very universal experience.
The encoding mechanism is brutally effective. But, you know, this makes me reflect on how deeply we have been conditioned by the traditional school system to fear and actively avoid this exact biological mechanism.
The school system inherently teaches us that a mistake is a defect.
It is a failure of character or a failure of intelligence.
We treat mistakes as permanent marks on our permanent record.
Right. You take a test, you get a sterile red X scrawled across your paper. What does that red X actually do?
It produces shame.
It produces shame, which raises the affective filter we talked about, and it produces avoidance that tells the student, you are bad at this, you should stop trying.
But in the messy world of natural language acquisition, a mistake is not a failure. It is a required data point.
Require.
Yes. Without the fall, your body cannot calculate the balance.
That is so true.
And there is a profound difference between the red X on a test and a social mistake in a real conversation.
What's the difference?
The red X isolates you. It is punitive. But making a mistake in a real conversation is actually a moment of vulnerability and connection.
Oh, I like that.
Think about it. Most often, the other person smiles, they empathize, they kindly help you find the correct word,
Right.
and the conversation just moves forward.
Great. They don't whip out a red pen.
No. That social correction is constructive and neurologically sticky.
We have to actively deprogram our fear of the red X. We really do. We have to embrace the messy, iterative, highly embarrassing process of falling off the language bicycle.
Which brings our discussion to its ultimate synthesis, really. We're talking about a complete paradigm shift in how we approach the acquisition of human knowledge.
Yeah. If you take away anything from this deep dive, let it be this fundamental shift. Walk away from the math equations of language.
Leave them behind.
You are not a human calculator trying to compute the present perfect continuous tense in a 5-second window. It is a biological impossibility, and you need to stop beating yourself up for failing at it.
You must embrace your brain for what it actually is. A brilliant, organic, deeply complex pattern-matching machine.
Stop trying to glue individual isolated words together with rigid, abstract rules. Start looking at language as music.
Learn chunks as continuous flowing songs.
Build the physical motor pathways in your mouth for in the morning and at night. Let your muscle memory do the heavy lifting so your conscious mind can focus on the connection.
Drown yourself in comprehensible input. Lower your affective filter. Read stories that captivate you. Listen to podcasts that fascinate you. And just trust that your subconscious is quietly, efficiently mining the data while you simply enjoy the narrative.
And above all, chase the mistakes.
Chase them.
Get on the bicycle, speak with your beautifully broken grammar, and risk the fall. Let that little uncomfortable flush of embarrassment be your greatest teacher, searing the true patterns into your mind forever.
Because that vulnerability is the only pathway where true fluency is ever achieved.
It really is. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a broader philosophical question to mull over, something that builds on everything we've uncovered today about how the brain naturally learns versus how we force it to learn.
Okay.
If we have been so falsely conditioned by our institutions to treat language, which is a deeply human, organic, and messy process like a rigid mathematical formula, what other areas of our lives are we suffocating with rules?
That forces you to re-examine how you approach almost every complex skill.
It really does. Think about it. Are there other areas of your life where you are intensely memorizing the physics book?
Instead of riding the bike.
Right. Maybe it's a creative hobby like painting or writing where you are obsessed with the technical rules of perspective or story structure.
Or perhaps it's even in your personal relationships.
Oh, that's a good one. Are you desperately trying to do the math to ensure you never make a mistake, to ensure you never look foolish? Are you clinging to the safety of the rule book to avoid the vulnerability of the experience?
Because the experience, the messy, unscripted interaction, is where the actual living happens.
The rulebook offers an illusion of safety, but it prevents actual mastery. We want the clean X-ray. We want the unbroken bone, the perfect formula, the guaranteed A+. But reality is murky, it's fluid, and it requires you to get a little bruised.
I guess.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I hope this discussion gives you a deep, profound sigh of relief. Go out there, absorb some great stories, lower your filter, and purposely make some beautiful, embarrassing mistakes today.
So the next time you stress about a grammar rule, take a deep breath. Focus on patterns, learn in chunks, and consume more English content. Grammar is caught, not taught. If this secret changed how you view English learning, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share it with someone who hates grammar. Have a wonderful day, and keep leveling up your English.